So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a very short span of time in around 30 minutes. The idea is very simple. We want you to cover your current affairs on a daily basis because current affairs are important. But we don't want you to spend your entire day just reading the newspaper. Therefore, through this lecture series, we'll be covering your entire day's current affairs within 30 minutes. But just watching this lecture would be job half done. Yeah, because just after watching this lecture, you need to revise this lecture as well. Because revision helps in consolidating these current affairs for longer periods of time. Okay, so if you really want to consolidate these current affairs in your memory, you need to revise this lecture after watching this lecture. Now, you can revise this lecture from our notes, and these notes shall be available on our Telegram channel. Now, where can you find our Telegram channel? Well, just below this video in the comment section, you'll find a link. Just click on that link, it will take you to our Telegram channel, and from there you can download the notes for this lecture. Okay, so let's begin today's session. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we are going to cover in today's lecture. Now, today's lecture is going to be short and crisp because not many news items that featured in today's newspaper were important from the perspective of civil services examination. Only 3 topics were of importance from today's newspaper, and therefore we are going to focus all our attention on these 3 topics. Number 1 is Archeological Survey of India's Excavations in Ratnagiri, which is a place in Odisha. And this place is famous for Buddhist monasteries, ancient Buddhist monasteries that are excavated. Okay, it was a Buddhist town at one point of time. So we'll talk about this. Then recently, Supreme Court came out with a judgment which talked about, basically, it actually talked about death penalty in India, but we are basically going to focus on Supreme Court's opinion on death penalty. Why? Because recently a local court in Calcutta actually gave the person accused in the Kolkata murder and rape case life imprisonment. Though CBI was asking for death penalty, but the court did not give the accused death penalty, and there is a reason for it. Supreme Court has given some guidelines for awarding death penalty. Supreme Court has said that death penalty should be awarded only in rarest of rare cases. So we'll talk about this entire issue. Which are those? What are those rarest of the rare cases? We'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about Rajamundal Movement. It is basically a topic related to modern history, but it is being covered. And now you will say that why modern history is being covered in current affairs? Well, because something happened, and that is why a significant event of our past would be discussed in the current affairs lecture. Okay, so these are the 3 lectures that we are going to focus on. Let's start discussing them one by one, starting with topic number 1, which is Archeological Survey of India Excavations at Ratnagiri. So in December 2024, ASI took up excavations at 5th to 13th century Buddhist complex. Okay, so basically an ancient Buddhist complex was found. Okay, that was 5th to 13th century old. Now archaeologists started excavating this site for in the hope of finding various artifacts. Okay, now this ancient Buddhist complex is in Ratnagiri, which is in Odisha's Jajpur district, and the excavation has resumed 60 years after the first excavation was done. So back in 1960s, well, the first excavation in Ratnagiri's Buddhist complex was done. Then it was abandoned, and now again in 2024 December it has started. Okay. Now the aim of archaeologists in this excavation is, first of all, to find more archaeological evidence. Okay, archaeological remains. So to uncover more of the complex remains, and the other is to find links between Odisha and Southeast Asia through Buddhism. After all, this is a Buddhist site. So archaeologists are excavating this site to find new artifacts, new Buddhist artifacts, and they would also want to search for links between Odisha and Southeast Asia, because through Odisha, a lot of trade used to happen in ancient and medieval times with Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Thailand, and whatnot. Okay, so definitely because of trade, there must have been some cultural exchanges. And it is said that Odisha played a major role during Ashokan times, Mauryan Emperor Ashoka's times, to spread Buddhism to Southeast Asia. Okay, now about Ratnagiri, let's talk about Ratnagiri first. So it is 100 km northeast of Bhubaneswar, capital of Odisha. and part of the famous Diamond Triangle. So there are three cities which are famous Buddhist archaeological sites. Okay, Udayagiri, Lalitgiri, Ratnagiri. Now these three are collectively called Diamond Triangle because a lot of Buddhist artifacts were recovered from from these three places. Okay, now Ratnagiri, as the name translates, Ratnagiri is basically Hindi for hills of jewels. Okay, was first documented as a historical site in 1905. Ratnagiri rivaled Nalanda. Now, this is the opinion of some experts. You know, Nalanda is a famous town in Bihar. It is famous. Why? Because at one point of time, it was a world famous university, right? So, it was a center of learning. Now, many experts, historians believe that Ratnagiri was an equally good center of learning, center of Buddhist learning. So, Ratnagiri rivaled Nalanda as a learning center with even some of the Tibetan texts found in this place. When archaeologists were digging this place up, they found Tibetan texts. That means Tibetans must have traveled to this place down south or down east in Odisha, traveled to Ratnagiri because of Buddhism. Okay, because we found Tibetan texts, and Tibet is basically the birthplace of, not the birthplace, but in Tibet, Vajrayan form of Buddhism emerged significantly. As you know, this is again an ancient history lesson. Buddhism has three sects. Okay, Heenyan, which is also called Theravada, Mahayan, and Vajrayan. Vajrayan is famous for tantric practices. So Vajrayan is basically tantric form of Buddhism. That is why it is also known as Tantrayan, and it is quite popular in Tibet. So we found Tantrayan text, Tibetan text in Ratnagiri. That means Ratnagiri must have been a huge center of learning, huge center of Buddhist learning. That's why people from far reaches came to this place. Okay. Now, in the beginning of this topic, I talked about the connection with Southeast Asia. Now, what is this Southeast Asia connection? Okay. Well, Odisha has long enjoyed maritime and trade links with Southeast Asian countries. That includes Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and whatnot. According to historians, pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, silk, camphor, gold, jewelry were popular items of trade between ancient kingdoms of Kalinga. Odisha was the ancient kingdom of Kalinga and Southeast Asia. Now, earlier Odisha was called Kalinga. Now, Kalinga was annexed by Ashoka the Great, Mauryan Emperor Ashoka, right? But to annex Kaling, he had to wage a brutal war. It was so brutal. Buddhist literature says that it was so brutal that Ashoka was basically, he couldn't forgive his soul for it and he converted to Buddhism. And after that, Ashoka sent emissaries to different parts of the world, to Sri Lanka, to Thailand, to Burma, to spread Buddhism. Okay, so Ashoka the Great gets the credit of spreading Buddhism out of India, or he was the first person to do so. After the conquest of Kalinga, Mauryan Emperor Ashoka played a key role in spreading Buddhism to Southeast Asia. And most of these trade links or most of these connections with Southeast Asian countries were through the ports in Kalinga. That is why Odisha has a special connection with Southeast Asia, and that is why archaeologists are speculating that we will definitely find various artifacts from Southeast Asia in Ratnagiri. Okay? In fact, so strong are the connections between Odisha and Southeast Asia that the state of Odisha annually holds Bali Yatra. Okay, Bali Yatra is a annual festival. Okay, now Bali is an island of Indonesia, and Yatra means travel. So voyage to Bali, a 7-day festival to commemorate the 2,000-year-old maritime and cultural links between Kalinga and Bali, Indonesia. So already Odisha understands the cultural links between Southeast Asia and the state. In Odisha, Buddhism is stated to have particularly flourished under the Bhaumakara dynasty, which ruled parts of Odisha between 8th to 10th century. So remember this name, Bhaumakara dynasty. It is for the very first time this is happening that you are learning history through current affairs. Generally, that doesn't happen, but it's important. Okay. Topic number 2, death penalty in India. Now, we all know the horrific Kolkata murder and rape case, right? Now, Sanjay Roy was an accused in this case. A sessions court in Kolkata sentenced Sanjay Roy. First of all, they found Sanjay Roy to be guilty of rape and murder, and they sentenced him to life imprisonment. But the case was being investigated by Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, and CBI had plead or basically CBI had requested the court to give him death sentence. Okay. In fact, Chief Minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, also said that the guilty should be hanged. Okay. She is also supporting death sentence. But why couldn't this sessions court in Kolkata, despite so much public support for death sentence, why couldn't this sessions court in Kolkata give this person death sentence? Well, it is because of a judgment by Supreme Court in 1980 called Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab. In this judgment in 1980, Supreme Court said that the sentence of death should be passed only in rarest of rare cases. Okay, the court said that it should only be given in rarest of rare cases. Now the question arose that how do you define rarest of rare cases? What do you mean by rarest of rare cases? Okay, for different judges, it might mean different things. So the Supreme Court in the same case gave certain circumstances, explained some circumstances. Okay, if those circumstances are true in your particular case, then that judge might give a person a death sentence. Okay, so court basically laid down certain circumstances under which death sentence is valid. Now, these circumstances are called aggravating and mitigating circumstances. So remember this case, Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab. In this case, Supreme Court said that death sentence should be used in rarest of the rare cases. And what constitutes, which circumstances would call for them being classified as rarest of rare cases? Well, Supreme Court mentioned these circumstances also. Okay. About death penalty or rarest of rare test, in Bachchan Singh, the Supreme Court considered challenge to constitutionality of death penalty. So basically, what was Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab? In this case, Bachchan Singh was basically challenging the constitutional validity of death penalty, whether death penalty is permissible under our constitution. Okay, he was citing Article 21, right to life. So Supreme Court admitted this petition because it was a constitutional challenge. Okay, now Supreme Court constituted a 5-judge bench, 5-judge constitutional bench. Constitutional bench is that bench of judges which decides upon cases related to constitution or interpretation of constitution. So Supreme Court in Bachchan Singh case appointed 5-judge constitutional bench, and that 5-judge constitutional bench said that first of all death penalty should be applied in rarest of rare cases, and then it laid down a non-exhaustive list of aggravating and mitigating circumstances for courts to consider while making a decision. So it laid down the circumstances under which death penalty is permissible, under which death penalty is non-permissible. Okay, and these guidelines were given to courts to make a better judgment. So future benches in different courts of India, whether that's Sessions Court, High Court, Supreme Court, they refer to these guidelines for giving a punishment. Now, what are these aggravating and mitigating circumstances? Okay, so first we'll talk about aggravating circumstances. So these are those circumstances which, if true, if found true, would tilt the court's decision towards death penalty. That means if these circumstances are found true, then the accused might be given death penalty. Now, what are these circumstances? If the murder is pre-planned, calculated, involves extreme brutality, you see, the court said it should be applied in rarest of rare cases. So if that person applied extreme brutality and it was not a crime or murder of passion, that you were angered by something and you murdered someone. No, it was pre-planned, cold-blooded, calculated, and with extreme brutality. Then death penalty. If the murder involves exceptional depravity, again extreme brutality. If the accused has been found guilty of murdering a public servant, police officer, member of the armed forces while on duty. So if any member of the armed forces or public servant is being killed because he was fulfilling his duties, then you might consider giving a death sentence. So these are called aggravating circumstances. Then we have mitigating circumstances. If these circumstances are found true, then you can think of not giving death penalty. Okay. So what are these circumstances? Whether the accused was under the influence of extreme mental and emotional disturbance at the time of offense. So if it is found and it is proved that the person was not doing mentally well, emotionally well, then you can go for life imprisonment, not death penalty. If the accused believed their actions were morally justified, Okay, if the accused believe that they have taken revenge for their family member or whatnot, okay, then you might think, you won't stop giving them punishment, but you might think that you will give them life imprisonment instead of death sentence. If the accused suffers mentally and is unable to appreciate criminality of their action. Others are age of the accused, if the accused is a minor or very low in age, okay, probability of posing a continued threat to the society, probability of reforming, that this person needs to be killed, he is unable to reform himself. If the accused was acting on the directions of another person, if the accused believed their actions were morally justified. So these are some things where you can be saved from death penalty. Okay. And last news item, which is Mandal movement. Okay. Before understanding this news, you need to know some facts about modern history. Okay. Now you all know that the British ruled over India till 1947. Now, while they were ruling over India, India was divided politically into two parts. British India, which was completely under the control of British colonial government. The law was made by British colonial government. They were the ones executing it. Everything was under their political control. Okay, this was British India. The other part of India was princely states, which was under these were those territories that were under some feudal lord, some zamindar, some maharaja, some nawab, right? So these were princely states like Maharaja of Patiala, uh, then Raja of Travancore, right? So British India, princely states. Now the thing is, our freedom fighters were struggling for various rights for the Indians, various civic rights, right to vote, uh, various civic liberties, democracy, freedoms. They were fighting against the Britishers for having these freedoms for the Indians. So their fight was with the Britishers. So these freedom fighters led all their struggles in British India. Okay, the princely states were, well, under the complete control of Maharaja Nawab Sultan. Okay. Now the efforts of these freedom fighters bore some fruit. British government was forced to do some reforms. Pitt's India Act, not Pitt's India Act, but Government of India Act 1990, Morley Minto reforms, Montagu Chelmsford reforms, Government of India Act 1935. So British India was, or British colonial government was having these reforms in British India. But these new rights that were being given to Indians were not being given to citizens of princely states, because Britishers were the rulers of British India. They could have these reforms in their territory, but princely states were still being ruled like ancient kingdoms. Okay, there was no right to vote, there was no civic liberties, no fundamental rights, nothing of that sort. Okay, no representative government, nothing. Okay, plus the freedom fighters also made a calculated decision of only struggling in British India. There were many people in princely states that approached our freedom fighters, including Mahatma Gandhi, to help them secure these rights in these princely states as well. But Mahatma Gandhi was not too enthusiastic in the beginning because he needed the support of some of the princes to oppose Britishers. So he was not ready to make them angry. So that is why initially he was not supportive of these movements in princely states. Similar movements were being led in British India. Okay, but Mahatma Gandhi supported those movements in British India. But when the citizens were demanding similar rights from their local Nawab, Maharaja, or Zamindar, Mahatma Gandhi initially was hesitant. Okay, but later he supported. So one such movement was happening in the princely state of Punjab, which is known as Patiala, the Patiala state, and many other states, princely states in Punjab and Haryana. Now, these movements, which were for securing democratic rights for citizens of princely states. These movements were called Mandal movements. Okay, so now you have a brief idea. Now let's jump into the news. January 20th marks the death anniversary of Seva Singh Thikriwal, who spearheaded the Mandal or self-rule movement against the rulers of Punjab's erstwhile princely states. Now, because he was opposing princely states and those princes and kings, well, those kings arrested him. They put him in jail and he went on a hunger strike and he died because of it. Okay. He died in jail while he was on hunger strike in 1935. Since then, a memorial has been held annually in his native village from January 18th to January 20th. Remember, Rajamundal movement participants were fighting against princely states for the similar rights which freedom fighters were fighting for against British India. Okay. Now about the movement, the Prajamandal movement was a part of Indian independence movement from 1920s to 40s. The movement was a campaign against local aristocrats who ruled the princely states of British Raj. Focus of the movement was to protect civil liberties, protest against oppressive taxes, reforms in peasant conditions, educational institutions, and have a responsible government. And by responsible government, we mean representative government. Have a parliament of sorts in these princely states. Now, why would princely states or these kings, why would these kings want a parliament? Of course, that would eat away their power. That is why they were opposing these Prajamandal movements. Okay. Now, about Seva Singh Thikriwal. So, Seva Singh's direct criticism of the prince's rule led the state to implicate him on theft charge, though the state couldn't prove anything. But he was still jailed. He formed Punjab Riyasat Praja Mandal in 1928 and was made his president. He was arrested by police in 1933, sentenced to 3 years in jail. In early 1934, he started another hunger strike over his mistreatment by jail authorities. He remained on hunger strike. No one listened to him, and he died because of it. Okay, but he basically popularized Praja Mandal movements in Punjab. Okay, and that would be all. With that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. It would add more value if you revise this lecture as well. So please do not forget to revise this lecture. And on that note, I'll sign off. Thank you.